for attending. As you may be aware, this is part of our very exciting launch of our entrepreneurial international innovation series. As you will know, because you are probably in some way linked to LSE, whether you're a student or an alumni or just in some way connected with us. LSE is a highly international university. We have over just almost 70% actually currently international students. So we have an eclectic mix of entrepreneurs all over the globe building and scaling socially impactful businesses. And our mission is to be able to support them in their entrepreneurial endeavors. Now, we've just opened actually our London co-working space, and we've watched kind of what happens when you bring entrepreneurs, especially LSE entrepreneurs, together, and the exciting opportunities that emerge from that. And we would love to be able to basically roll this out all over the globe to ensure that every alumni that is looking at building a business is fully supported, and so can maximize their opportunities and their possibilities for success. Now, I'm very excited about today. We've engaged quite a bit with the Israeli entrepreneurial community. You may have gone on one of their the tech trips that the Student Society organizes every year. We have an amazing bunch of alumni over there, and we're now starting to kind of flesh out a program of events and support kind of vehicle, so that whenever a student wants to go over to Israel, that they have a community that they can kind of jump into. If an alumni decides to build their business there, they can access resources. But we thought today would just be a great opportunity for Elinor, who will introduce herself in a minute, just to basically kind of lay out the landscape, to explain a little bit more what it is about Israel that makes it such an attractive option for innovation. You will likely know that Israel is very much the king when it comes to innovation, and more recently, social innovation has kind of come to the forefront, which for Generate and for LSE is a really exciting moment. So Elinor, I'm going to hand over to you just to introduce yourself, to talk a little bit about the very exciting role that you play within this ecosystem. I want this to be a really interactive event. We want, if you are here, just to find out a little bit more about it, to ask specific questions, or just to kind of get a flavor for whether this might be for you, then we hope that this event will give you the answers to that. But please feel free to drop any questions in the chat, or put your virtual hand up, or just shout out. It's a free for all, really. And I'm going to ask Elinor a few questions, but I'm going to first of all just ask her to introduce herself.
So hello, everyone. Really, really great to see you here. And thank you, Laura and LJ, for inviting me today. I'm so excited about the opportunity to share a little bit more about the Israeli ecosystem. And so just a little bit about myself. I was born in Israel, and 19 years ago, I decided to come to London. And I did my master's in Organisational and Social Psychology at LSE, so a very, very proud alumna. And since then, I've been able to work around in organizations that I really, really care about their missions. And I was very lucky and fortunate to work for Tel Aviv University Trust, here in London, raising money for the university, JW3, which is one of the largest cultural community centers, Jewish community centers in London. And there I was doing the Israeli connection. And I was also, and now I'm actually working at the UK Israel Tech Hub, which also links me very closely to the ecosystem there. So this is a UK government team, and we are based between the UK and the British Embassy in Tel Aviv. And what we do, we help the British corporates and VCs to tap into the best innovation from Israel. And of course, the same way, we're helping Israeli startups expand globally via the UK. So very, very close to the ecosystem there. And I'm also studying. I'm studying at the moment at Haifa University, a virtual course. So still very much connected to Israel through that course. And I'm studying impact investment. So that's an area that I'm super passionate about. And I think, as LJ said, I have a few things that I'd love to share with you today, but please keep it interactive. And, you know, I'm happy to answer everything I know. And if I don't, I'll share with you or refer you to the person that I know for sure can help.
Thank you so much, Elinor. So yeah, I think to start with the obvious question, kind of what makes Israel such a powerhouse for innovation, and just give us a kind of a high level overview of the ecosystem there and what people might expect if they decide to live and build a business or just do business with entrepreneurs over there.
Sure, that's a great question. And I think before we dive into the reasons and the trends and the data, I'd love to look at an example that really demonstrates the essence of the culture that we're talking about, because at the end of the day, it is about people. So when Waze, and I'm sure all of you know Waze, the user-generated navigation technology, when they were acquired by Google in 2013 in over $1 billion deal, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu called the founders on the night of the sale and really cheered them on. And he said, "Congratulations, you've reached your destination." And in the papers, people were quoted that saying, "We're so proud that we were the test group and we were part of the reason that Waze was so successful." And I think this sentiment really demonstrates the intimacy of the tech ecosystem in Israel, which is one of the really unique features. It has that strong sense of community. Everybody feels that they have a part in these huge success stories. And this often motivates people because you know everyone and you care about each other, and this also makes it very easy to tap into the collective knowledge and to people's network. And it's a big advantage for startups who seek validation, seek partnerships, seek funds in the early stages when no one knows them. And when we talk about the scope and the level of innovation that's coming from Israel, you're absolutely right. Innovation powerhouse, which is extremely impressive given the fact that it's only 9 million people, which is the size of London, essentially. But it has the highest number of startups per capita, over 8,000 startups at the moment, 400 accelerators, over 2,000 investors, if I'm not mistaken. So really huge number for such a small country. And it is becoming, and I'm sure you read about it or you hear or you know it, it is becoming a very driving force for world-leading source of innovation today, everything to do with machine learning, AI, data analytics. That's really the core of technology. And also a lot of commercial market firsts that came from Israel, the USB, what we call the disc on key, the drip irrigation system, ingestible pill size camera, which is really impressive. So looking also globally, Bloomberg ranked Israel top of the five top states in the world on anything from R&D investment, patent applications per capita, number of public companies. And I looked at data for today's session, and I saw that actually in the first quarter of this year, the startups in Israel raised a record of $5.3 billion, which is almost double the one from last year, the first quarter last year, which is quite impressive because last year in the first quarter, we weren't in the pandemic yet. So it's quite impressive. It's quite impressive results. And I'm happy to dive into the reasons, to talk about the ecosystem. If you have any questions so far, happy to answer.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and it sounds like it's so full of potential for kind of budding entrepreneurs. What would you say? So a lot of our grads are early stage entrepreneurs. They've dabbled with potential startup ideas while they've been at university, and they're looking to kind of start up an early stage business in Israel. What would you recommend they do? Because it sounds like it's quite an established ecosystem. So how would you start? What would be the starting line?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, if we take a step back, because it's very important when we come in to a new ecosystem to really understand what is driving the people there, how come it is what it is. And I know it in my work when I'm trying to connect the UK and Israel, there's often a clash because people don't know the other side well enough. So perhaps if we can dive into the reasons and kind of what drives people and the ecosystem there, we can talk about specifics. And actually throughout, I can also talk about specifics. So when we look at the mentality, I'm very driven by social psychology, because this is what I've studied, very, very passionate about that. So Israelis are often not afraid to be argumentative and honest and direct. And we use that term chutzpah, that's a Yiddish word for audacity, really to refer to that fearless ambition that Israelis have, that do now, ask later. And I see it really daily. And this also translates into a business approach that questions the status quo and pushes the boundaries. And it also translates into a national drive to really innovate in every area of business. And I was, just looking at the way that Israelis responded to the crisis, not only in tech, just generally speaking. There's so many creative ideas that came from there on how to pivot and how to navigate that terrible crisis, that I was extremely impressed. And another feature of the culture that breeds innovation is that that flexibility and adaptability to change, seeing failure as successful learning. These are things that are all widely encouraged, and you can see daily in the attitude. It's just really fearless. And you can say that one of the contributors, I guess, to that mentality, and also to the technological knowledge that Israelis have, is the military service. And of course, this doesn't help people who come in from the outside, but it is important to understand the role that the military service plays in the tech ecosystem, because there's also things that are coming out of there for citizens or for people who are starting businesses, like accelerators, for example, that you can then join. So the Army, the reason that it's so powerful and almost like acts as an accelerator for startups in Israel, is that it identifies and recruits the right talent from a very, very young age. And so they train them on cyber skills, which then equips them to build strong AI and machine learning capabilities. And this also results in heavily software-oriented technologies that we see coming out of Israel. So this is on the hard skills, but clearly on the soft skills, there's the leadership, the sense of responsibility that you get from a very young age, that risk-taking, that problem-solving abilities, and also the social ties, that people, form in the Army, which then come in handy when you're next raising money or looking for talent. So not to kind of say it's not possible to break into that ecosystem, but just to be aware that these ties do exist. And unfortunately, they sometimes push away the outsiders, but this is something that I can talk about a bit later on diversity and inclusion. That's a point that is important to mention. And then there's also the academia. That's very super exciting and also relevant to here, because Israel has a very strong higher education system, and it's also a home to the highest percentage of engineers and scientists per capita. And many ideas are born and tested in universities. But more importantly, I think there is a connection between academic institutions and the tech industry in Israel. So that tech transfer that's giving rise to many innovative products. So for example, if we look at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, they have an R&D center that's called Yisum. And they span off 125 companies, which is quite impressive. One of them is Mobileye, which was acquired by Intel last March for more than $15 billion. So that's super impressive. Just shows you the power that these commercialization units have in those universities. But it's more than just creating and protecting IP, intellectual property. They also really build bridges between the academic world and the outside world of entrepreneurs and investors. And also important to know that they don't just rely on sources of investment of philanthropy. They also have really properly business-oriented sources, like lots of partnerships with corporates, for example, Novartis, Johnson & Johnson, Google. So that gives a very strong financial backing. So it is important to be aware of that resource and the R&D and the accessibility of these type of academia institutions. There's also Tau Ventures, which is Tel Aviv University Ventures, that's also a very, very strong player in the ecosystem. Just goes to show the link between the academia and the tech. And the last thing is about government. The government supports brilliantly the tech ecosystem, very, very proactively. It really acts as an enabler, as a neutral partner that shares the risk alongside the private sector. So there's tons of funding and grants, and if there's any kind of specific questions, I'm happy to refer you to the right partners on that. But there's tax redundancies, incentive programs for startups. The country also invests 4.3% of GDP in research and development, which is actually, I think, the highest, one of the highest in the world. I think the UK is 2.5%. So these really strong R&D capabilities are a great base for innovation. The government also plans conferences in technology, and this investment of the government, and it helps to also bring multinationals into the country. So we see, I think, around 360 big companies like Motorola, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Facebook. They're all setting up their R&D centers in Israel, which then creates wealth and jobs, and it comes back again to the ecosystem. So it is important to do a little bit of research when it comes to the benefits from the government, universities, and again, I'm happy to take specific questions if you have.
Thanks, Elinor. Just had one question around, so a lot of the businesses that are coming through Generate or just that are coming out of LSE generally have a kind of strong alignment with the UN SDGs. So what would you say, can you give us a bit of an overview around the kind of social innovation ecosystem? You mentioned impact investment, that kind of thing, just to get a flavor for what's on offer there.
Yes, no, absolutely. So I guess this also links to the way that some of the startups responded to the crisis, because what we've seen in the last year, for example, that Israeli founders found ways to leverage their technology for the greater good and played a vital role in the recovery. So tech startups that are completely for-profit, didn't look at themselves as social impact, suddenly became more impactful. So we have Rhizometer, which identifies and also clears air particles in closed spaces. We have a marketing solution platform called Apps Flyer, which launched a COVID-19 fund to tackle the pandemic. We have telemedicine solutions, remote monitoring for elderly population, really vast range of solutions that kind of converted themselves. And as you said, it's very much connected to the Israeli impact scene that is growing and growing. And I think the pandemic also gave it a push. We've seen there's tech summits, social impact tech summits in Tel Aviv that are really attracting global audiences. There is tech for good accelerators that emerging across the country. Impact investors also started to push towards a more inclusive society in Israel, that really ensuring that minorities have access to capital, and also ensuring that entrepreneurs are not only creating strong social impact to address the UN SDGs, but they're also thinking carefully about the kind of socially responsible route to get there. So I personally know, for example, Pitango, which is a VC that hired a sustainability director. I can't remember, a head of sustainability, I think. And her role is primarily to migrate those tech ventures to become to have a social impact in them. So I know that she's working a lot with VIA, which is transportation platform. And so they're thinking together how to create value for society using that. So for example, transport people in need of medical care. This is an example. I know that there's also the connection between philanthropy and technology, which is really growing. So I spoke the other day with someone from Bet Easy. I'm not sure if you're familiar. This is a nonprofit. This is a charity, basically, that helps children with disabilities. They do amazing, amazing work. But they discovered is that they need to even strengthen their impact by pushing forward technologies that help children with disabilities. So they're perhaps starting their own venture to like some kind of an accelerator to push assistive technologies. And again, there's a lot of collaborations that I hear about from technologists and philanthropists. And I think the more we collaborate in that, the more we'll see results. Because as you know, tech entrepreneurs, they have sometimes the solution in mind, whereas we need to come with an understanding of the problem. And this is where philanthropy can help a lot. And I think in Israel, at least in the course that I'm doing, we can see the understanding of it growing.
Thanks, Elinor. That's a great answer. Some great name drops there as well, which is wonderful. I'm going to hand it over to the audience and see if anyone has any questions before we move on. Anything that's been said, or any just kind of specific questions that you guys have that we can answer. Maybe I'll just, while people are thinking about the questions, and feel free to just drop them in the chat box as well. I mean, we've heard about all the amazing things, and I'm ready to buy my ticket, to be quite honest. It sounds so exciting. But obviously there are challenges with every hub. Can you kind of run us through the kind of the difficulties that there exist still, or the challenges that young entrepreneurs might face when they are I think you've raised a couple, but if you can just go into that a little bit more as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's very important to understand the challenges, because there always are. And the more we understand and prepare for them, whether on an ecosystem level or an individual level, the better we can do. So I guess when we look at the Israeli market, it's obviously not the end destination for Israeli startups. This means that Israeli companies, they're often distant from their target markets. And a lot of the times, the Israeli market actually acts as a test bed, as a place to test technologies, and then they go global. And it's hard to be away from your target market, whether it's in America, Europe, and lately also in emerging markets like India and Africa, when we talk about social impact innovation. So to overcome this challenge, I guess, we often see Israeli startups organizing themselves to be international companies from day one. So not to be too far, too long. And sometimes, like in my work in UK Israel Tech Hub, we don't only speak to very established companies already. We get them when they're young to show them the world outside, and introduce them to different cultures, and for the really to help them grow much rapidly to get to their end destination in a way. And another challenge is that the market is maturing in Israel. You know, it started in the 90s, and there's now, we can see a little less risk appetite. So although there's enough money in Israel for innovation, nearly half of investments are going to later stage, to mature companies, and less to early stage. So some say that Israel is moving from the startup nation to the scale-up nation. And the issue is that to breed innovation and ensure that, that Israel maintain its edge, we need to allow founders to raise money in their early stages. And the ecosystem understands it now, and you know, making an effort to shift, but it is something to bear in mind when you talk to investors, for example, to see, you know, where they're at in the mindset, and perhaps coming from a fresh perspective on the ecosystem on the whole. But the upside of that, I guess, is because it's maturing, and many of the angel investors already had a few exits under their belt, either as founders themselves, or if they've supported founders, their capital that they invest is much more focused, either on marketing, on personnel. So then it helps to achieve this rapid growth. And another challenge is clearly the political instability, both in the Middle East, but also internally. Israel just had its 4th elections in 2 years, and you know, its government grants, budgets are sometimes put on hold. I mean, we don't know necessarily who to speak to when there's so much chaos around government. But we do see, for example, on the upside, normalization agreements between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, for example, in other countries in the Middle East and North Africa, that really open up much more opportunities in tech as well. And the last challenge, I guess, I can talk about is one that's very, very close to my heart, which is the lack of diversity in technology. And this is a wider problem. This is not just in Israel. Clearly, it's a problem for society on the whole and for innovation as well. But in Israel, because it's such a small country that relies heavily on tech, I guess the impact, you could say, it's much stronger, because at the end of the day, Israel is employing mostly, the tech ecosystem in Israel is employing mostly non-Orthodox Jewish men. And majority are based only in the center, in Tel Aviv. So we see many minority groups in Israel. So we have Arabs, we have Ethiopian, we have Bedouin women, Orthodox Jews, that are, and it's a 65% of the population that are just not taking an active part in the startup nation. And this is a problem, because you don't have enough voices and perspectives around the table, so it can really hinder innovation. But it also goes hand in hand, I guess, with the challenge that the tech ecosystem has now, with just shortage of skilled tech professionals, because at the end of the day, we are not tapping into the entire population. And the reasons could be anything from geographical, cultural barriers. We talked about the army, so sometimes these populations, they don't go to the army, so they're missing out on that. Also a choice of education and profession. Some of them prefer to have job security rather than to go into such an insecure ecosystem like the tech. And as I said, I'm very passionate about, I'm very active in this. I launched the UK-Israel Women Leading Innovation together with my team and the British Embassy to really help women from both ecosystems connect and promote themselves, giving that visibility, but also really business value as much as we can. We've started together with Present Tense, which is a non-for-profit organization that helps minority in Israel to go into tech. We started an accelerator for Arab entrepreneurs, and there's loads that of initiatives there. There's Kamatech that helps religious Jews. There is Tech for Peace that brings together Palestinians and Jewish people, specifically around technology skills. There's Hybrid that also helps Arab Israelis. This is a kind of an accelerator. There's She Codes, Women to Women is a mentoring program. Naomi Investing Club, it's another. We see tons of them that I'm working with, and I know, and I'm admiring their work. And I hope that together, all of these small initiatives can make a really big impact.
Strong impact. Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of quite a transitional phase. Well, just while we had been chatting, we had 3 excellent questions come in on the chat box. Thank you to you 3 for sending them over. And so I'll just do it in order. So Danielle, understand several international organizations have opened R&D centers or incubators in Israel. Do you know if there's an updated list of these, maybe organized by industry, so you can kind of just go through them?
Okay, fantastic. So you're looking for R&D centers of large corporates. Do I understand the question correctly?
Yes. Well, there's a lot of activities all around, but I would be interested in just joining one specific industry-based ecosystem. So my field is work tech and HR tech. And I know of, a few very well-known and successful companies from Israel doing that. And some, is it Papaya, the unicorn, the most recent one?
Yes.
So, there is clearly an ecosystem. Instead of just going all across, I'd be very happy to connect with just a part of the Israeli ecosystem. So I was asking if you know anything about, industry-based groupings within the most updated one. I've only heard about.
Are you familiar with Startup Nation Central?
Yes,
yes. Yeah. So they're a great source to start with, and I'm happy to also look for specific ecosystems and hubs or accelerators or anything in that, and I'll send it via LJ and Laura, because I am not familiar with this specific sector in Israel. My focus is more on health tech, cyber, transportation, and so on, because we're working specific kind of sectors that are driven from the British government. But I'm very, very happy to follow on with you and send you to the right direction.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. With
and
pleasure.
Danielle, if you send me a direct message with your email, then we can pop you guys in contact. And then going on to the second question, Artur. Hi, Artur again. Are there any virtual channels to engage with the ecosystem for the country for partnerships and testing remotely? So giving the example of chats and groups.
So Israelis are very strong on WhatsApps, actually. I don't know if it goes under the virtual channels, but it's incredible. There's loads and loads and loads of WhatsApp groups. So if it's for specific sector, again, I'm happy to check for you. But yeah, this is the main kind of source that they do. They may be also using Telegram, but I'm not sure which group is using which one. It's very, very specific to the needs, really. So when it comes to virtual channels, again, depending on the sector and on the need, I'm super happy to go check this and connect you to the right people.
Thank you. And that is true. We've been doing a project with an Israeli alum recently, and everything is going via WhatsApp. So
it's incredible.
Yeah.
I am starting a VC club, a UK Israel VC club now. And the Israelis are very, very keen on getting everybody's WhatsApps, and the British are a little bit,
they're like, no, there needs to be an email trail or it didn't happen.
There needs to be an email trail, and there needs to be some distance. Thank you very much.
Yes, exactly. Step away from my private phone. Brilliant. And then thanks to Artur for that. And Kwame, nice to see you again. Yeah, it's a good question. So given that there's so much kind of link up to the military and so many relationships developed through that channel, how would you suggest that you break into the startup ecosystem if you don't have that? So arts and sports are examples that Kwame has given there as possible channels for entry.
Yes, so what I find really, really easy in Israel is just to approach people. They are so approachable. And the chutzpah that I mentioned before, I mentioned it because it's really key to understand it, because their chutzpah, they have the chutzpah, and they also expect others to have the chutzpah. So nothing offends Israelis, okay? So the more you'll be direct with your ask, just the key thing is really to map the ecosystem, to understand who you want to target. LinkedIn is, of course, a great resource for that. And then to come with a specific ask, very straightforward. You'll have a virtual coffee. They'll get you to where you want to get. That's how it is. And I find it so much easier than here in the UK. But the thing is, because we live here so long, we think that everywhere else is the same, but it's not. In Israel, you will have the telephone on your WhatsApp, you will have a CEO of a company, you'll have your children's head teacher on your WhatsApp. It's really, really informal and open. So as much as it's a close-knit community, it's also very open to people. It loves people and collaborations.
Brilliant. It's a mix of kind of petrifying for a British person and also really refreshing as well. I can't quite work out which side I'm on.
I mean, you do need to tone it down a little bit when I'm bringing Israeli startups here. Then you need to be aware of that and not to just, because they would just jump and email the CEO or whatever, But you need to tone it down. But the other way around, you need to certainly dial it up.
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at business deals, kind of sealing the deal, like it's much, much better to have your approach, I think, to some extent, than to kind of, would you be so kind as to possibly look at my pitch deck, which quite often is the
exactly. And I am guilty as charged in doing that. Would you mind? And then one time I got someone's like, are you asking me how much I'm charging?
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, that's what I was asking. I just went like that.
Yeah, no, we feel your pain. Elinor, Arta's asking if we can share your contact details afterwards. Is that okay?
With pleasure. I'm super happy to help in any way I can. Again, just to tell me the sectors that you're interested in, and I'll try to refer you to the right people, because it's all so accessible. I think especially also where I work and the British Embassy, there is some kind of a really, really lovely connection with the ecosystem. We have a great overview and we can get to the right people quite easily.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, I know we're just coming up to the end, but just for everyone who's here, that this is just the beginning of a really exciting adventure that we're going to be journeying with Elinor on. So watch this space. There'll be a number of other events, hopefully some treks, hopefully later down the line, some kind of activity over in Tel Aviv that you will be able to get involved in. So do stay in touch. I will share, I'll share this recording if you know of anyone else that might be interested in learning more about the Israeli ecosystem, and I'll share Elinor's contact details. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your brilliant questions as well. Laura, thanks for organising, and Elinor, thank you so much. I feel like I've just learnt a lot about a place that I didn't know as much as I'd like to have. So thank you so much.